Welcome to the Scholarship America's Book Talk, where we sit down with authors to discuss big ideas that's really impacting the next generation of workers and leaders. As you heard, my name is Mike Nylund. I'm the president and CEO of Scholarship America. Uh, as the nation's largest scholarship administrator, we have this really unique perspective on the intersection of higher education, workforce development, and the private sector investment, because we work exclusively, or not exclusively, but primarily with the private sector. And it's interesting. One of the major trends we've noticed is this increasingly urgent need to support students as they work towards trade careers. And quite honestly, I've been doing this work for over 2 decades, and that drum has been beating for a while. I would say for the last 15 years, but what we're noticing in the last couple of years is that beat is getting really loud. The beating of the drum is getting quite loud right now. So why is that? Well, across both the public and private sectors, there's this really significant new level of investment taking place in infrastructure, in manufacturing, clean energy, and as we all read about this rapid expansion of AI data centers, and all that is resulting in accelerated record growth. At the same time, there's also this serious shortfall of trained workers in the United States. In fact, a few weeks ago, Forbes reported that millions of trade jobs remain unfilled, including 500,000 in manufacturing alone. Now, the good news is there is some good news, and that is the more and more families and students are realizing that that traditional four-year degree is no longer the only path. The National Student Clearinghouse, in fact, reported 3 years of double-digit enrollment growth in vocational-focused two-year schools. So that's good news. And according to Thumbtack, 55% of Gen Z respondents say they are considering a career in the skilled trades. So I think the word is starting to get out. But to keep that momentum going, we need to ensure those students have the tools they need to support any education or training that they have to get into the workforce successfully. From our perspective, scholarships, apprentice retention grants, and emergency aid are incredibly important tools to do just that. And so, we're really proud that we administer nearly 20 million of scholarships each year, supporting $10,000 or 10,000 students, I should say, going into those trade and technical schools. But to be honest, if you go back to the numbers I shared at the beginning, those numbers need to be much greater than what they are today. So to explore how that support fits into the broader conversation around trade education, I'm so excited to welcome authors Jason Altmire and Riley Burr. Jason is the president and CEO of Career Education Colleges and Universities, CECU, and he is a former U.S. Congressman from Pennsylvania. Riley Burr is CECU's Vice President of Policy and Research and Executive Director of CECU's Research Foundation. Their new book is Trade Up: Why the Workforce Belongs to Skilled Trades and How Career Education is Transforming the Workforce. It will be out via Sunbury Press on April 28th. That'd be tomorrow, actually. And Jason and Riley are here today to discuss how America is rethinking the path from classroom to career. Jason, Riley, welcome to you both. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mike, for having us.
Yeah,
thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, what I'd like to do is just start with a couple questions, and the first one I'll let you decide who answers it. But in the book, and thank you for sharing it with me. I had a chance to read it over the weekend, got an early preview of it, and I think it is spot on. In the book, you spotlight the rise of what you call the tool belt generation. Who are these students, and what is drawing them to skilled trades and career-focused education instead of, that traditional four-year college?
So the tool belt generation is actually a term coined by the Wall Street Journal, and we really liked it and made it a chapter of the book. So the tool belt generation is Gen Z. And Gen Z, as you mentioned, 55% are considering a career in the trades. So they're increasingly choosing a different path than the four-year university, which is sort of what all the generations before them have done since,
Mm,
early 20th, mid 20th century. People wanted to get the four-year degree. That's what they were told would lead to success. It would give them the job that they want, the middle class dream. It's exactly what they wanted. And Gen Z, however, is probably the most chronically online generation. I think they average 7 hours of screen time a day, but they're not just playing games, they're taking in so much information in that time that they're spending online. So, with that, they have been able to see information from the news, from their peers, from influencer, and with that, they've built a really particular set of preferences that sets them up almost perfectly for the skilled trades, for career focused education.
mhm,
So, first, we've actually already seen, as you mentioned, 55% are interested in trade school, but a third of Gen Z has said that they are not interested in higher education at all.
mm,
Most of them cited that they were concerned about the value of higher education and the cost because they saw that millennials, the most educated generation, came before them. And despite being the most educated generation, they were also the generation that took the longest to achieve economic self-sufficiency and establish their careers. A study from Jobber actually found that 52% of millennials working in the 2010s were working in a field that didn't even require the degree that they had
mm,
spent so much time and money on. So Gen Z has sort of benefited from the pitfalls of millennials. They've gotten to see what works and what doesn't, and they're acting accordingly. They no longer want to go to a four-year school just for the sake of going to a four-year school. One of the big priorities they express is a sense of purpose. They want to go to school, get the skills that they need for a job, and then go use those skills every single day. That plus seeing the student debt crisis unfold, they're just a little skeptical of the four-year degree, and it works out quite well that they go to the trades because they also express a preference for flexibility, for hands-on work and independence,
mhm,
all of which can be offered in a career in the trades. I mean, what we have seen in our research for the book is that skilled trades pathways often offer strong career prospects, a lower barrier to entry, high earning potential, and most importantly, maybe, is greater insulation from AI. I think I, along with
mhm,
everyone, has seen at least 5 articles a day about how AI is coming for white collar jobs. Generative AI is being trained to do the administrative tasks, the tasks that entry level recent graduates would be able to do. And so now we're seeing really high unemployment of those who got their four-year degree and now they can't really use it. And so a lot of these articles also mention that blue collar trades tend to be much more AI proof.
mhm,
It's much more difficult for current technology to take over these roles, and they're also giving blue collar trades the opportunity to grow. I mean, you look at the resources and the workers that are needed to construct these AI data centers. It is wild the amount of work needed to power them, and they're all coming from trade school. So Gen Z is really seeing this as a big opportunity to take advantage of the AI boom. I mean, I think a lot of parents complain about how online they are, but you can see how they're acting accordingly. They're doing exactly
mhm,
what they need to do to respond to the world around them. We've heard some really wonderful success stories just in researching the book. There's one, Jacob Palmer, I know that Jason and I really enjoy, where he went to a four-year school and within a few months he didn't like it. He had all the great
mhm.
grades, he had the extracurriculars, so it wasn't that he couldn't do it. And that's a big message of the book is trade school is not a backup option. It is a perfectly viable option on its own. So he went and he got an apprenticeship with an electrical contracting firm, started his own business, and was making six figures by the time he was
Mhm.
23. So he's just one example of how Gen Z is really kind of trying to make that transition and use the information they have to better their lives.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. It's interesting. And I just think about my own day-to-day life and what I see and what I experience. And, I come to work and we are working a lot right now with organizations that are trying to reskill employees that are being displaced by AI automation. And then every day I drive past this manufacturer that can't hire enough welders. And so it was really interesting the way you answered that question. And in my day-to-day life, that is the contradiction I'm seeing, which is we're working with folks to help retrain those that they are being displaced. And I literally drive past this manufacturing plant every day, and they cannot hire enough people.
I think, Mike, that is if you were to ask one sentence to describe what we explore in this book, it is that paradox.
Mhm.
How is it possible that we have record numbers of college graduates that cannot find jobs in their chosen field of study? And at the same time, we have record numbers of employers that cannot find enough skilled workers for
Right.
the in-demand jobs. And that's what this book is about.
That's right. And it's a good, I think, introduction to the next question that I have for you, because I think there's connotation, perspective, whatever you want to call it. But, there a lot of, I think, families and parents and students still picture a quote unquote trade school as some sort of narrow or limited career path. What does career focused education include in 2026? And what makes these programs, from your perspective, effective at preparing students for in-demand jobs?
This is a question that we got a lot as we were researching the book, and we both, of course, work in this field. And I personally have visited over 200 trade schools. Riley has visited a number also. And we put a chapter in the book for this very issue to describe what is it like to go to a trade school? What does it mean? What's the experience? How do you get in? What happens when you're there? What type of coursework? What are the things based upon your chosen profession that you're going to be doing, and what are you going to be exposed to? And when you think about that question of why we can't find enough skilled workers, and what about young people and the changing perception? And as Riley said, we for decades have pushed this narrative that the four-year path was the preferred path. And those who couldn't cut it in the four-year path, or for whatever reason chose a vocational career, that was a substandard option. That was kind of a fallback. And thankfully, we are no longer in that position now. And the Lightcast research firm, I think there's so many facts and data that we can point to, but one of my favorite is there are 2.9 million vacancies annually for skilled trades, 2.9 million listed job openings. And the sum total of America's education and training production, trade schools, apprenticeships, unions, high school vocational programs, employers training their own work, everything. The sum total of all of that is 1.25 million.
Wow.
Which leaves a gap of 1.7 million unfilled positions every year. And you can go down the line and look at electricians and plumbers and HVAC and welders and high wire. I talk about the schools that our association serves, and it's everything from high wire linemen to underwater construction and everything in between. And I do think the influence of social media, that there are so many accounts now that show the excitement and the enthusiasm of these students, people like Jacob Palmer, who's active on social media, who tell the story of what it can be like, and the type of career and family sustaining wage that you can have. And it has finally started to make a difference. And you have people like Mike Rowe out there talking about it every day. And that has all come together to really change the perception. And the fact that now we have data centers and AI and chip manufacturing for semiconductors and things, we're rebuilding the electrical grid in the country, modernizing the entire electrical grid. These are things that people can see. They know what's happening. They know the opportunity that's there. And it has led to a fundamental shift in the way the trades are perceived. And that's nothing but good.
Yeah, that's right. And Mike Rowe has been out there for 15 years beating this drum. He was one of the early ones talking about this. So yeah, it's a great example. In our role, we work with sponsors all the time that are trying to find a way to make their community stronger. And we get this question asked a lot, but I would love to hear from both of you of how you would answer this. How can scholarships for trade school students, help more people enroll and finish their training? And what should sponsors of scholarships know about designing them that would work for career education programs?
I think it's first important to understand the type of student that is being served by a trade school. They are more often than not going to be non-traditional students. They might be older students, students that are already working. Sometimes they might be caregivers.
Hmm.
But when it comes to scholarships specifically, about 60% of students at career colleges come from low income backgrounds, which means that they have an annual income of less than $30,000 a year. So they need a lot of financial support to even enroll in or continue a degree, but scholarships geared towards trade programs can be particularly beneficial just because of the nature of the programs and how quickly they deliver return on investment to their students. Georgetown's Center on Education and the Workforce does a return on investment study every few years. And something that I found particularly compelling about the data in 2025 is that the programs that had the best return on investment over a 10-year period, the first 10 years after graduation, was the trade schools. It was the associate degrees. It was 2-year degrees because these students spent less time in the classroom and more time in their career. They spent a few years or even less learning a very specific skill that they could transfer to the workforce. So scholarships for these particular programs are very, very helpful for low-income students that go there because they can quickly see a return on their investment. They can quickly be employed. And I think that getting to see these schools, Jason mentioned the school visits that we've done, seeing the students and seeing the need is really, really powerful. There's a school visit that I went on a few years ago, and something that still stands out to me that the president said is most of their students are single or expectant mothers. And they realized that their high school degree wasn't going to cut it. And they needed to find a way to provide for their child that they already had or were about to
Hmm.
have. And this program in particular, I mean, I think that their placement rate for graduates was something along the lines of 90%. So
Yeah.
90% of students are getting a job at this school. And another particularly compelling statistic is that 75% of those students were having to take out student loans. So creating scholarship availability for these students to go into programs that have these high placement rates and have these high return on investments can be really, really powerful. And we also talked a little bit about the workforce shortage. So I'm going to bring in how sponsors can help the workforce shortage and help their students. And I think the most important thing in designing scholarships that work is being very intentional with the students that you're serving and
Hmm.
what you want them to get out of it. If you want them to get an in-demand career out of this trade program, you've got to help them do that. You have to look at the students and what they need. And I think something that we have seen is different studies that show that scholarships are most effective when they include some sort of incentive. Theoretically, a sponsor could say, here is a scholarship for this specific trade program because we need students who know this trade. We need employees who know this trade. So they help train those students that they need so they can help kind of close their own workforce gap by
Right.
targeting where their scholarship dollars are going. I mean, we at CECU, we recently launched a scholarship to careers pathway, and it's something along those lines where people can donate to the scholarship fund on a more general basis, but they can also donate based on an industry or a region that they're most interested in supporting. And that oftentimes comes back to them in the form of having employees that are ready with the skills that they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Interesting.
would add
Go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
with relation to scholarships, question that we get asked is about cost of programs and comparing different options. And when you think, I talked about the magnitude of the problem and just the incredible number of vacancies. Just as one example on apprenticeships, say union apprenticeships, the Steam Fitters Union in Philadelphia last year had 609 applications for 85 spots. And those 85 folks are going to be good. They're going to get good jobs and they're going to do well in that profession. But what happens to the other 500? And the average community college, just on average, a program in the trades has about 30 students.
Mm.
So if you are a single mom, a non-traditional student for whom long transportation and work hours and flexibility and perhaps weekend and evening courses, that's important to you, that setting probably is not going to be to benefit. And that leaves trade schools. like
Mhm.
we serve. And these are non-traditional students. I tell all the time the story. If you go to a graduation ceremony at a traditional university, you'll hear people yell, "That's my kid, that's my daughter, that's my
Yeah.
son." You go to our graduation ceremonies at a trade school, what you'll hear is, "That's my mom,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
dad." And these are people that worked hard and they needed that flexibility, and the are upskilling or reskilling or changing careers, went through a divorce, got downsized at work, lost their job because of AI, whatever it might be. These are the folks that you would be helping with scholarship programs, people who are in a life transition, who want to do well, who are looking for opportunity, and who need a setting that's going to accommodate and have flexibility to help them through the challenges that they face. They're probably working a job or two on the side in addition
That's
to
right.
raising the family and going to school. So that's the difference of the type of program that you would see compared to an apprenticeship, a community college, and then at a trade school.
Yeah, I really appreciate both those comments. I think one of the other things we have learned in this work and through the research we and many, many others have done is this, and I mentioned it earlier, this need for emergency aid. So if you are a single mom trying to raise kids and, go to get a skilled trade, and something happens to your daycare or something happens to your vehicle and you need help, 300, 400, $500, just that quick emergency aid, all the research shows will get them over that hump and get them completed with a certificate or a degree and get them onto a great career. So I think as a mission-based nonprofit, one of the things that we can also do to support all these students is really tell that story about how important emergency aid is, particularly for low-income students and particularly for low-income moms. Um, Okay, last question, and again, really appreciate the conversation. It's kind of it's a good connection to what I just mentioned. For a company, a foundation, or individual who wants to invest in America's skilled workforce, what is one thing they can do this year to make a measurable difference for students on a career education pathway?
I think it's what we were just talking about, finding programs that are serving the type of student for whom education would not be an option without that support. These are folks that do generally come from underserved, low income backgrounds. They are hardworking. They are juggling a lot of things. They want to do better. They want to improve upon their employment availability and make things better for their family. And that's what these type of scholarships do. I would add to what you mentioned earlier, Mike, wraparound services, very
Right.
important. The childcare, the transportation issues, really important to this population. And yes, for Gen Z, this is becoming an increasingly popular option, and we're going to need all hands on deck to solve this problem. And it's great that there are people from all generations that are getting into the trades. So there's really no limit in the type of student and the way you could design a scholarship to direct towards the type of student that you were hoping to serve.
Yep, perfectly said. Um, wow, that went by quickly, but really appreciated the conversation. Jason and Riley, thank you so much for your time today. Again, the book, Trade Up, Why the Future Belongs to Skilled Trades and How Career Education is Transforming the Workforce, will be available tomorrow on Sunbury Press, wherever you buy your books, ebooks, or audiobooks. In addition, a plug for our next uh, webinar. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, we invite you to Scholarship America's upcoming webinar, very much aligned to what we just talked about. It's called Bridging the Skills Gap, Investing in Trade Schools and Career Readiness. That will be moderated by Casey Welch, who is the Vice President of Career Focus Initiatives at Pearson. This webinar will bring together a panel of corporate and nonprofit professionals to dig deeper into the ways we can use scholarships, grants, and like we talked about, emergency aid to keep students on track towards trade careers. That webinar is Thursday, May 7th at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's free for all to attend. Jason, Riley, again, thank you for the great conversation, and we'll see you next time on Scholarship America's Book Talk.